I am a full-time Uber driver, providing both taxi and food delivery services. One day, after a rough shift, I drove well past midnight in the hopes of picking up a few more fares before calling it a day. As I just dropped off a passenger far from my home, I was hoping to pick up a request on my way back. But my app was quiet and frustration began to set in. Exhausted, I started driving a little faster than the speed limit, eager to get home. As I approached an intersection, I glanced at my phone once again, worried I might miss a potential request. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure, appeared to be a homeless person, stumble out of an alleyway and onto the road. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The homeless person collided with the front of my car, and I felt a sickening thud as their body rolled off the hood. In shock, I got out of the car to check on the person, but to my surprise, he was gone. There was no sign of him, no blood or body parts or anything left behind. I scanned the empty and deserted street, but there wasn't a soul in sight. Just as the silence began to feel deafening, my phone pinged with the sound of an Uber delivery request. The sound seemed to echo louder than usual in the stillness of the night. I looked down at my phone, and to my surprise, it displayed a high-paying food delivery request heading in the exact direction I needed to go. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts as I realized I should report the accident, but at the same time, I didn't want to miss out on such a lucrative order. As the timer for accepting the request ticked down, I couldn't help but wonder if the homeless person was real or just a figment of my imagination. Would accepting the order now result in a hit-and-run charge later? But with no one in sight and the enticing order on my screen, I made the decision to accept it at the last second. I walked back to my car with a heavy heart, walked around my car to do a finally check, still seeing nothing, feeling guilty, but drove away with a sense of unease. As I continued to drive towards the restaurant, my mind was still grappling with the strange encounter from earlier. I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been more than just my imagination. I did check all around my car, but found nothing. Suddenly, I heard a cough from the back of my car, making me jump with shock. I quickly looked through the back mirror but saw nothing. After parking on the side, I turned my body around to check again but still found nothing. I reassured myself that maybe I was just tired and imagined things, and continued on my way. As I waited in the slow-moving Taco Bell drive-thru, I put my car in park and closed my eyes, hoping to take a quick rest during the wait. As I getting closer and closer to the pickup window, suddenly, the sound of a light cough coming from the back seat startled me again. This time, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a person sitting in the back corner of my car. My shock and fear were indescribable. I quickly turned around, hoping that what I saw was just a trick of the light or a shadow. But before me sat a frail-looking Chinese man wearing a Chinaman's hat partially covered his eyes, giving him a mysterious and somewhat intimidating appearance. He raised his head, and as I looked into his eyes I was surprised to see that they were full of energy, despite his small stature. Then suddenly, he raised his hand and pointed towards the front of the line, greeting me with a polite, "Hi sir, what are you looking at? You are holding up the line. It's time for you to pick up your food." I drove to the pickup window and grabbed the bag of food like I had done 1,000 times before. As I started my delivery, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Was the Chinese man a ghost haunting me? I kept glancing in my mirror, but he seemed like a friendly person, or ghost, with no malicious intent. After a while, I couldn't stand the silence anymore and mustered up the courage to ask, "Who are you? What do you want?" The man replied and said, "I called an Uber and you picked me up. Don't you remember?" His tone was surprisingly reassuring and normal. But I knew for certain that I hadn't picked up anyone. I might even hit someone earlier. Despite my mounting panic, I tried to keep my composure and pretended that everything was normal. After all, driving with a passenger in the back was just another day on the job. I kept driving and the only thing I could hear was the GPS directing me to the customer's location. The destination was in a high-end, unfamiliar neighborhood that I rarely visited. As I turned into a dead-end street and stopped in front of a house with a beautiful gate, I waited for the customer to come out and collect their food. But then I heard the man in the back seat unbuckle his seatbelt and open the door. I turned my head in surprise, wondering what was happening. The Chinese man stepped out of the car and approached the passenger side, tapping on the window gently. I rolled down the passenger seat windows, then he said to me, "Thank you for the ride and deliver my food. Please drive safely." I was so shocked and didn't know what to say. Then he continued, "By the way, the code is 1234. Then he reached his hand and grabbed Taco Bell food from me. The code was correct, and I successfully finished my delivery. However, I didn't leave right away. I couldn't take my eyes off the Chinese man as he walked towards the beautiful gate, grabbed his keys, opened the door, and walked in. Delivering food and dropping off passengers had become so routine for me, but this was a supernatural experience that left me perplexed. I went home, skipped taking a shower, and went to bed right away. I couldn't understand what had happened that day. Everything felt normal and weird at the same time. The next morning, I woke up still thinking about the strange events of the previous night. When I checked my phone, I was surprised to see that my last order had garnered a $100 tip, making it one of the best days I've ever had. I hurried outside to check on my car, only to find a fresh, sizable dent on the front. It was apparent that I had hit something last night. I drove to the high-end house where the Chinese man had lived, only to find an empty lot for sale. I couldn't believe it. Where did he come from? I drove to the spot where I thought I had hit the homeless person, but the road was full of cars and it looked as if nothing had happened. The thoughts of who the Chinese man was and where he came from still lingered with me to this day.